Automation is nothing new. Indeed, the principles of our trade union movement came from the factories, yards, and the workplaces of the 19th century. The so-called First and Second Industrial Revolutions brought us steam-powered mechanisation and electrical power and mass production. The workplaces and communities that experienced these changes were the incubators of collectivism and solidarity, the birthplace of modern trade unions. It was this trade union organisation that allowed workers to take on powerful bosses and win. In the last part of the 20th century, we experienced the third industrial revolution of microprocessors, electronics and computers. This saw many changes in the way we live and work. It embedded privatisation, deregulation and corporate greed on an unprecedented scale, and with it growing inequality. In too many cases, it destroyed the gains we made with working people. We are now experiencing the beginning of a fourth industrial revolution, a digital revolution. The speed, scope and magnitude of the changes it is bringing are unlike anything we have ever experienced. It has the potential to tear apart key areas of collectivism and solidarity. Of course, there will be opportunities, and we need to be ready to take them. We need to plan with our stewards and reps, ensure workers get their rightful share of the profits, seize the opportunity, organise, and retain work as a central pillar of society. Thank you, Chair Conference. Sharon Graham, Executive Officer. This morning I'm going to give a much shorter version to the automation presentation that we're taking around the regions. At the moment we're going to NISCs, we're going into some workplaces, we're obviously talking about it at the Executive, at the regional committees. And Unite has been for the last 7 months trying to bring together all of the information under what they are calling Industry 4.0, the new round of automation. I should say right at the beginning, it's obvious that there of course are opportunities in automation, Industry 4.0. It's estimated 170,000 new jobs will come in domestically to the economy. But what we're focusing on in the first phase of this is what are the threats, because it's really important that we're ready, that we know what the lead-in times are, that we have strike-ready workplaces, that we are engaging, but obviously that we're ready to push back if we need to. So the initial document and the initial discussions are very much about the threat. As we move into the second round of discussions with our reps and stewards up and down the country, it will obviously move then into the areas of opportunity, making sure that we are organising in the right areas. Everybody should have in front of them a pack. You may have one between two. It's automation and it's also got the draft new technology agreements. We had a lot of people take more than they needed yesterday back to their workplaces. So I think this morning you've got, some of you have one between two. Don't worry, we've got more coming. But you'll also see the slides behind me if you don't have one of the packs yourselves. So I'd just like to ask you to move on to page 1 of the pack, and it will come up behind me also. And I just want to make a couple of comments, because I know we're short on time. What you'll see there on page 1 is effectively a list of Unite's 20 sectors, and we've done a lot of work in terms of ranking each of Unite's sectors in terms of how they will be affected by Industry 4.0. And this isn't just saying, you know, job X, job Y, it's looking in detail at every single task that makes up those jobs. Because in this new round of automation, it will not necessarily be whole jobs that will be taken in the first instance, it will be tasks, but accumulatively they will result in job losses. Before I just take you through the ranking very briefly, I just want to say a couple of things about automation generally. As we said in the film, obviously automation isn't anything new. We've experienced it, it's happened to us, you know, we have good agreements in some places, we haven't taken advantage in other places. But what's been said by all of the economists, you know, whether they be in Germany, Britain and Ireland, or whether they be in America, is that this round, the escalation of how Industry 4.0 will move, and also because of artificial intelligence, that it is going to be like nothing we have ever experienced. In the 80s, there was a phrase that people went from the pits to Poundland. What the economists are saying now is that actually lots of these other jobs just will not be there, skilled jobs as well as other areas of work. So the economists are agreed that around 35% to 42% of jobs may go. The other thing just to say, and the movement's talking about this at the moment, some unions actually are calling for this at the moment, which is bizarre, is about universal basic income. And this is where there is a thought process that the silver bullet to these jobs going is that people will be paid to stay at home, that there will be a universal basic income. And at Unite, we're worried about that because who are we saying that jobs are going to be replaced by people having money to stay at home? Who sets the rate in a capitalist system? When we're given money, they can take that away, and who sets the rate of that money? But also, what does that mean for collective bargaining? So universal basic income you will hear about, you may already have heard about it. What we're saying is that a lot more work needs to be done on whether or not that's even part of a solution, and that work should remain a central pillar of society, and we should look at that in the first instance and move it on from there. You'll see also as you go down page 1, as I say, the lists of the sectors. And those top sectors, those 11 sectors in the top piece, are the 11 sectors at the moment, when you look at where Industry 4 sits today, are most at risk. There are 650,000 members in those 11 sectors, and at the lower rate of 35% of jobs going as Industry 4.0 moves, that would be 230,000 of our members just in those top 11. As you come through, you can see the middle section and those thought to be least at risk. It's important to say on this that no sector is completely in a situation where they won't have any automation. Every sector will have a part to play in terms of Industry 4.0. But if you take somewhere like service industries, which looks to be right at the bottom of the threat, it isn't because jobs in the service industry couldn't be done by a robot or digital, i.e. a cleaner. It's just because at the moment the cleaner is cheaper than the robot. And therefore, as wages are moved, then obviously people can move in and out of those threat areas. If I can ask you now to move on to page 2 of the report, just very briefly here, those 650,000 members in the top 11 sectors, we've actually dispersed across the region. So what does that look like for each region of Unite? And you can see on the right-hand side there of the page, taking 35% of that 650 is the 230,000 jobs that could be lost. If you think about the fact that what's been said is there'll be 170,000 new jobs domestically in the economy, just in our top 11 sectors, that wouldn't even touch the sides of it. And so therefore, we want to be very prepared for what may be coming. The idea of the conversation with the stewards and reps is that by March 2018, so by the March executive, having had the conversations in the workplaces, at the NISCs, at the risks, at the executive itself, we want to produce 2 documents. One will be a document that will be your sector particular. So how is automation going to affect you in your sector in terms of the types of automation, the lead-in times, the investment required in terms of that? But also critically how that affects your regions, because obviously we want to make sure that we understand what is the effect in particular regions as well in certain sectors. As I move you now on to page 3 of the document, again relatively briefly, but you'll see here, and in the bigger document, as I come round the regions, you'll see this in more detail, we actually look at what are the technologies driving Industry 4.0. Why are they seen to be very different from what has happened before? And you'll see there on page 3, we highlight 4 different areas. And if I just take the Internet of Things, which people may have heard of already, but the fact that objects, devices, digitalization, where you get computers talking to each other, learning from their mistakes, changing their behavior, means that in a food plant, for example, 20,000 jobs in just one of our areas could go if they introduce the Internet of Things in that particular area. So the Internet of Things is driving driving it because it's the conversation that's happening within the robots and digital. And you can see there also on the bottom of page 3, we talk about advances in machines learning. This is probably the single most area that is driving the automation. The fact that a machine can be programmed, it does the job, it learns from mistakes, it reprograms itself to do the job in a different way. And you can see the example I've given there on the bottom of page 3 is that sensory artificial intelligence, not necessarily important what that is, but it will take over all areas of phone banking, anything where that type of work is done in 6 years. And so, there's huge amounts of our members who work in those areas, and that one piece of automation could move us into that space. I just want to say one thing about the internet, which I think is important because it's come up when I've gone round the workplaces and in some of the regions. We are very familiar with online transactions, online banking, all of those things are already taking jobs in some areas. But one of the things that the internet has been responsible for the most is the gig economy. And how fast the gig economy is moving. The fact that the platform of the internet is moving at such a speed means that the gig economy, which is rampant casualisation, is moving very quickly. It's not the same as automation. It's workers doing those jobs at a lower rate of pay, so it's undercutting, and we will be doing work on that. But the internet piece of Industry 4.0 has knock-on effects, and the gig economy is one of those. If you now look on page 4, you'll see a very brief page there on the responses from the trade union movement so far. And quite honestly, the short answer is it's not very good. Because in most of the areas where it's just small stuff being done, not looking at it as a whole, there are some exceptions to that. And you can see there IG Metall, which is the union in Germany, we do a lot of work with them. They probably are the only other organisation that has done really detailed work on automation. But they are focused in a different area because they believe that they will build the robots. And they're probably right. They probably will build the robots, although at some point the robots will probably build the robots. So they have a very different take on it. What we're saying is actually, whereas our political strategy around us having the platforms to build the robots, us having the science to do this, and the apprenticeships to do it. So obviously, we want to be looking at that as part of our solutions. Moving now on to page 5 of the presentation, you'll see now as you're coming through 5, 6 and 7 that Unite is beginning to develop 3 areas of a response. So first of all, we're looking at the short-term industrial response. So what do we need to be doing now to prepare? We are then looking at a longer-term industrial response in terms of power areas of the economy. And obviously, we're looking at the political response. And you can see there on page 5, there are a number of things that we are already doing. Collecting information from stewards at a workplace level in terms of what automation is there, what's coming in, how can we deal with that, so that we can develop a risk register as part of Work Voice Pay that you will be able to go into and put in your sector and know, well, this is the piece of automation that is going to be coming into my sector, and this is the lead-in time for that area of automation. You can also see there strike-ready workplaces, and I think it's worth just saying a couple of things about this. Anything we do in Unite, whether it's this industrial issue or another industrial issue, will only be won if the workplaces we're in do have good organisation. And so the terminology we're using is, are our workplaces strike-ready? Have we got the organisation we need in terms of that? You can also see alternative strategies there on page 5. Len spoke about this in his speech. Leverage is one of those. If a company wants to move to lights out, no people, today and not have anything back for the workers, then we would need to push back against that. And obviously, we're developing strategies to do that. Moving now on to page 6 of the document, this is really just the front page of the agreement you have in your packs. We have developed a draft new technology agreement, and what's important about it, Obviously, we need to be organised to get it, but what's important about it is it has the payback. You know, if we, of course, we're engaging, we want workers to get a bigger piece of the pie, you can see that there on page 6, but what is it we want back? Is it a shorter working week? Is it better retirement policies? What is it that we want as a union in terms of our demands, in terms of reinvestment in new skills? So the agreement, which I won't go through now, has those areas within it, and obviously we'll talk about those more when I see you in the regions. Moving now to page 7, this talks about Unite's longer-term industrial response, and I'll just say 2 things briefly here. Unite is not only the biggest union in Britain and Ireland, but it's also the union that is in the critical infrastructure areas of the British and Irish economy. There are 9 infrastructure areas that the government has documents on that if things happened in these areas, then the economy couldn't move. There'd be a crisis. And Unite lead in 7 of them. Examples: transport, food, energy, finance, etc. And what we're saying in the bigger document is, can we go in to really organise these and build these in a way that we haven't done before, so that if we needed to cause a crisis, then we could do that, because we are the union that are in those particular areas. Moving now to page 8, and this really depicts quite a big area of the bigger automation document that we've done, which is, what does a 21st century industrial manifesto look like? What are we demanding in the political arena? And you can see there on page 8, we put this really important point that we talk a lot about in the document, that legislation that retains work as a central pillar to society. And as has been said before, this could be a good thing, but only if workers get something back, only if it changes the way we live for the better, not longer hours, shorter hours. So you can see there on page 8, we talk about shorter working time, obvious stuff there, sector bargaining, which we've talked about before, research and development, education, apprenticeships. What should be in a 21st century manifesto, and how should Unite lead that and drive that through the political arena? The final page you'll see there on the presentation is the next steps. As I've said earlier on, we are disseminating this through the regions. It's one of the biggest discussions I think we've had in a long time with our stewards, because we must get it right. There's no point doing a presentation and having a paper, but not having action points linked to that, and everybody having a piece in terms of how we move forward. So following the disseminations in the regions, a lot of them have happened already, a lot are still to happen. Each group is coming back together, either in a regional context or a sector context, to talk about those 4 areas you see there on page 9. What's already happened in your sector? We know obviously lots have in terms of automation. What is existing good practice? Because there is existing good practice in terms of payback in some of the areas. What should be our industrial short and long-term response, and what should be our political demands? We're going to draw all of that together, as I say, throughout the next coming months, to go to the executive in March, and following on from that, we want to have a very detailed strategy in terms of how we get the best out of automation, and obviously how we move on in terms of the next steps. So, Chair, I'll stop there. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.